with Max Aulakh. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Remind me the name of your company, Max.
My company's name is Ignyte Assurance Platform, and we focus on risk management and cybersecurity.
I think I remember reading something about compliance, so I guess that falls under risk management too.
Companies typically have two forces that they got to manage when it comes to cybersecurity. Somebody's either breaking in or the government is forcing some sort of regulation that they must meet.
All right. Okay.
We tend to take care of the compliance side first, and then all of the technical engineering that comes with it as well.
And you were telling me before we started recording that you just launched a podcast too.
I did. Reckless Compliance. Thank you for that. Right?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a name overlap, right?
Yep.
My company name is Reckless.
So that's focused on compliance. And then I have one called the Emerging Cyber Risk. That's done with one of my friends. His name is Joel Yance, and that's where we bring in executive leaders and we talk about artificial intelligence and the risk that it poses when it comes to cybersecurity and just using it for business.
You were introduced to me by one of my earliest guests, actually, Steve Worrell. It was such a great, engaging conversation, and we were early in this process, and my camera stopped working for me.
He told me that. He's like, yeah, the camera wasn't recording, but I had a great time, Max. You should talk to him. I said, all right.
And it was big news. They think they had just won a big award with the VA, and they kind of were in that expanding mode, and it was big news. And he was a real gracious, engaged, good conversation. I really like Steve. You guys are doing some work with them.
Yes. So when you work for any kind of healthcare regulated industry, especially VA, you have to have assurances that your technology is solid, it's safe, it's protected. So we handle all of their security, including the latest certification that they have for ISO 27000. It's an international standard. That comes in handy for institutions like the VA and any other customer that they would have, right? It actually enables sales for them. So
how big is your team now?
So we're about 20 people. Majority of us are software engineers.
Is that your background too?
No, I was a prior military guy.
Air Force, right?
Yep, started in the Air Force. That's how I ended up here at Right Pat. But majority of the team is software engineers, and they're building this automation platform for compliance and risk management. And then about, you could say 5-6 of us are doing operations work, HR, marketing, those kinds of things.
So it's a software, your platform is really a software product. Is it web-based, a SaaS?
Yeah, tech-enabled SaaS, right? Or tech-enabled service, right? The thing with what we do is that it's not like just like a firewall. You install it, you click a button, and it just works, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to compliance matters, you might have opinions that are coming in from an attorney. So there's a service aspect to it. There's a lot of nuance to it. So there's a SaaS platform, but the service goes with it as well.
Yeah, we talked about that. It's not a simple thing you can just buy and you're good.
You need some expertise, but there are a set of customers we have, like Cincinnati Children's, for example.
Okay. They've
been a fantastic customer for the last 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
They have a team, though, right? Okay. They've got a security team.
They've got some internal expertise.
That's right. That's right. So, but for companies like Steve with River Rain.
Small group, right?
Small group, innovative, forward-leaning. It's best for them to not have a big team, right? So that's where tech-enabled service actually is a better fit.
What's the biggest surprise you've run into building a product? It's kind of a product-enabled service.
From that perspective, honestly, I underestimated the whole being an entrepreneur. I severely underestimated the amount of work it takes.
Did you?
Oh, yeah, man. 3 little kids. And when I was in the military, I was working 90 hours anyways as a security guy. So I was like, you're working 90 hours. You're in the desert. What could be worse? I'll start a business, So that was the biggest surprise, is the underestimated amount of work that it actually takes to build something of value. And that is different, right? That's not the same thing over and over.
How long have you been at it now?
So this particular endeavor for about 3 years.
Okay.
The last one was, I had another product for about 5 years.
So you've been an entrepreneur for 8 years. So by now you know what it takes. Starting out, I guess that was a surprise, huh?
Still learning, though.
Me too, every single day.
Yeah, MBAs are like way cheaper.
They're not as useful, though.
No.
I did an MBA, but I didn't learn nearly as much doing an MBA as I have in the last couple of years running this business. Right?
I did one, too, at Wright State, and I was like, maybe this will be a good way, but I paid more in failures.
What's the biggest failure you suffered?
Man, I would say hiring the wrong people.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is, because I mean, I'm not an HR professional. I'm a technical background, so I can assess when it comes to looking for technical expertise. But everything else, it's really hard to build like a good team, I would say.
There is no foolproof way. Every human being has yet to live their next day. So, no matter how great your hiring process, you can do everything exactly right, and there's always that risk that the absolute best hire with the absolute 100% capability can run into something in their life that changes their ability to perform or changes their ability to fit the needs of the business at that moment. So can't beat yourself up too much.
Yeah.
It's a tough product.
I know you're in recruitment and whatnot, right? So what I've always found is that when we're interviewing or looking at any kind of data, assessment data about a person, you just have like a small view into that person's life. Okay, I've got this degree, I worked at this many jobs, in my assessment, Briggs-Meyer assessment says I'm innovative, whatever your category is. But there's no way to really predict.
You know what I've found to be more telling than anything?
What's that?
Is how well people perform at anything. So a lot of times we tend to look at things that give people collections of knowledge or perspective instead of looking at how well they performed. If you're hiring an entry-level person to serve ice cream, for instance, I mean, you look at their high school grades, or you look at their competitive sports performance, or you look at were you second chair in the band or whatever. Generally speaking, people who perform well continue to perform well. That's not always the case, but the best indicator it's just the same way you would pick a mutual fund.
Past performance, right?
It's not all telling, right? Like they even say on the prospectus, like it is not indicative of future performance, but it's the best thing you have, right?
I think you're right. Yeah. Past behavior is the best indicator of potential future behavior.
Yeah, skill set match matters too, though. You don't always want to train somebody from scratch, so you do kind of want to discern a little bit of fit.
So what I've had to learn is that I've got to level set my expectations. As a smaller business compared to somebody who's coming from a larger enterprise, I think we talked about that. There's always a misfit in culture. Small business, the ship turns very quick. Large business, long planning cycles.
Yeah.
For us, we got to iterate. That is the planning, iteration.
Yeah, it's true.
One of the things I've learned, and I hired a senior executive, is that the planning cycles are just so much shorter, and you just have to be used to that.
Have you had trouble bringing people out of large organizations and then kind of integrating them into this business that has to pivot on at a moment's notice?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they love the idea of entrepreneurship and working at a small, innovative firm, but by nature, you don't have set processes because you're experimenting in the market at all times. You're trying to beat the odds. And you can't do same thing that everybody else does, then what's so different? And you're not going to have the same processes.
Yeah.
In fact, if you do, something's wrong,
True.
So
you have to cut some corners, right? If you don't, you're not going to get there quicker.
Or come up with a process that's non-existent. It totally cuts inefficiency in the market. That's how I look at it, right? So it's not about cutting corners, it's just cutting an inefficiency in the market. And that's hard. So if you have a 5-step process that you're used to, and somehow you found an efficient way to do it in 2 steps, that's what innovation is about. And sometimes when you bring talent from larger enterprise, they're not used to that. They want the 5-step process.
And I've worked in, I think, first half of my career I spent in large enterprise, and the last half small business.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even call it the best practice, but I learned the big practice. I grew kind of intolerant of the bureaucracy, if you will, and of the kind of the check boxes and all the, let's get impatient with the nonsense, right?
That's right.
And then I got smaller and smaller and smaller until I'm just this micro operation, right? It's like me and a handful of friends are running a business, right? There's no nonsense now, right?
Yep.
It's just, I think it's a little bit of just impatience with silliness.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, then all my customers are big companies now, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, okay, well, I got to talk to this person, and I got to get that check, I got to get this approval, and you get, oh, you're only allowed to say this, and you can't use the logo of that. And oh my goodness. Okay. So at the end of the day, we're all kind of beholden to some of the hoops, right?
Yeah.
And you run a compliance operation, right? Mm-hmm. You serve it, so you're right back in it, right?
I am, and that's the beauty. It's like I have no patience. I'm actually perfect for compliance because in compliance, there you deal with checkboxes, and the goal is to get through it efficiently as possible, right? So the money can be repurposed for like real cyber warfare, real threats. Like good intentions of compliance can lead to bad outcomes.
How so?
We do a lot of audits. We're auditors ourselves. And admittingly, sometimes what we're auditing is not even the right thing. We know that, but we don't have a choice because that's the playbook that the government wrote for auditing, right? So we have to do a check for something that I fundamentally believe as a cybersecurity practitioner we shouldn't be checking.
Because it feels like a waste of time.
It is a waste of time.
And you know there's more vulnerabilities over there.
Yes, and the government is, we're always behind in rulemaking and laws, right? They're never caught up with the new tech. But in order to enable sales and have assurances, you got to get through this. So I think I'm in the perfect business because I have no patience. How do we get through it faster? How do we make it faster? This is where, we're experimenting with OpenAI, a language model. That's all compliance is a big, ginormous language, domain-specific language of different laws. So I love it. I love it because it's just something that requires patience, but in order to innovate, you got to have less of it. Right? So
speaking of cyber threats, what keeps you up at night? What are you most worried about? So when you're over here doing the checklists and checking all the, required things that are kind of the necessary obligations and that you're not very concerned about, what's that nagging feeling that you feel like you should be paying more attention to, that you feel like you should be driving your customers' attention to?
Yeah.
What would you like us to be paying way more attention to in terms of our digital security?
I personally think it's trading off privacy or trading off convenience for privacy. So we constantly give away our private information.
Yeah, man.
Right? You know what I mean? Like this.
Yeah, chip me up.
Did you know what I'm saying? Like I'll chip you up, and you'll be like, "Hey, take whatever you want." Right? We always sell security in the name of like you'll be more secure, but in exchange we need more private information from you. The new way of looking at artificial intelligence, chat GPT, whatever model out there, we're going to have to dump and give even more private information.
Yeah.
Like a lot of private information, right? I think that's the next horizon for security is how do we control privacy of individual citizens? Because we give it away so freely.
I was watching something on the internet today about, I don't even want to say her name, but your household devices.
Oh, yeah.
that play music.
Probably listening to us right now, right? Like
your Amazon and Google devices. And where that my cousin is paralyzed from the shoulders down, so she's learning how to use a bunch of these tools to enable some independence that she wouldn't otherwise have. And so they're tremendously valuable to her right now in her life more than ever, right? More than you and I. Thank God they exist, right? All these different things to be able to call, communicate, look things up, blah, blah, blah. So absolutely critical, awesome resource. So I got them all over the place, and we just, they're setting up their house with them and everything. At the same time, I was just watching this video today about how they just accidentally are sharing stuff with the wrong people. The neighbors got access to this, and they weren't supposed to, and everything else. And that stuff's a little bit scary too.
It is. Like we pay a lot of attention to like B2B security, which I think is fine. But from a consumer standpoint, it's super scary. So that's what keeps me up at night. It's not
consumer stuff.
It's the consumer stuff. For some reason, business records, those kinds of things are definitely, maybe I've just seen too much of it. Like, credit cards, they can be replaced. But your fingerprint, your iris, as we creep into the lives of individuals, those things, they really can't be replaced, right? You know what I'm saying? Like you can replace a credit card, you can trace the bank transaction, get your money back, and because it's FDIC insured up to a certain amount. But if you lose your fingerprint, it's gone.
Yeah, and this is my face.
That's what I'm saying.
This is the one I'm rolling with.
That's right.
It's going to age.
Yeah.
But this is the one I'm rolling with. So this is the one that's open in my phone and my laptop. This is the phone that's open in my laptop and my way.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And they all have them.
They all have them. That's the massive breach, right? Like biometrics data out there. Right?
Yeah.
Some people don't care, but I like that in this country, we put focus on individual liberties, individual privacy. I do love that about America. That's the trade-off.
Yeah.
I'll make it convenience, but your individual privacy might be diminishing over time.
I've had my credit card replaced, probably 6 times. My bank card, actually. And my bank's always been good about honoring whatever loss or whatever. So I've never really suffered from it. It's always been minimal. Right?
Yeah.
To my knowledge, nobody's ever stolen my my iris scan or my thumbprint or my face.
Not yet, right? It's irreplaceable.
More persistent, right?
It's way more persistent. I don't know where we're headed, like as a country and as world, but I think we're gonna start to see way more focus on that sort of thing compared to just general business records being exploited.
Yeah,
those are valuable too, but as soon as somebody figures out how to monetize the way you look and all of that, I think that's all coming up next. You're like,
I don't want my face on the internet, man.
Yeah. That's truly what keeps me up, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
interesting. Let's just shut this thing down right now.
you're like, why are we even recording this?
But we are at the point of no return, right? Like everybody's face is on the internet at this point.
At this point, yeah.
There is no turning back when it comes to a lot of that stuff, right?
Well, there's no turning back. You're right. It's the cat's out of the bag.
We were talking about the cat being out of the bag with regard to AI and large language models and all that kind of stuff with the last guest last week. And I guess the same is true when it comes to, deep fakes and facial recognition and all that kind of stuff.
Cybersecurity people are always risk averse. They're like, don't do this because if this is happening, that's happening, right? We're always like, let's hit the brakes, right? With AI, a lot of cybersecurity people are like, well, it's awesome. It can be used for good. It's the AI experts that are saying it. They're the ones who are warning us, not necessarily the security people, So I just found that to be odd because like first time in history, security people are like, yeah, let's use AI.
Yeah.
But the people who are actually...
AI guys are scared.
They're like, oh, what did we create?
We'll see. Brave new world, right? What's next for you and your business?
So I think what we have to do is figure out how to scale.
Okay.
That's our next challenge. And that comes back to talent, finding the right people, and then scaling with remote teams. We're in Dayton, Ohio, right? There's not a lot of churn of people like in California or Washington, D.C. and other places. So we're deliberately and intentionally trying to figure out how to maintain our culture and scaling that culture. And that's next for Ignyte, is trying to really figure out how to scale the business.
That's a big challenge for every founder, I think. Not losing that special sauce that makes you love the place you work, right?
Yeah.
Love the organization, the customers, the people you work with. Let me ask you a hard question about your culture. What is it? How would you describe your culture?
I think at this stage, it's just a set of practiced, and that's the key word, practice beliefs and behaviors. I could easily say, it's my value statement and these 5 things, But at this stage, it's just the way we behave every day towards each other. That's how I define it. But it's really towards transparency, openness, and I always tell this to my team, hey, it's better for me to know what you don't know than what you know, so I can support you. Because if we're trying to grow, if I know what you don't know, then that's the person I want to hire next.
Yeah.
So I can support you. When you don't know something, you gotta open up. You gotta be vulnerable, right? It's really hard to say, hey boss, you hired me to do this job, but I actually don't know like part of this job. That's hard. That's like
expanding that kind of trust.
Yeah.
Where you've got a dozen guys, 20 guys, gals who say, hey, I know this much and I'm weak here. And expanding that kind of trust to people that maybe you didn't hire them and build close relationships with them directly. That does get tough when you've got 100-person staff.
Exactly. So like, how do you scale where people can trust each other, right? And be open and honest with each other. So there's a lot of coaching. I actually got an executive coach to help us through this, and she was wonderful. She, did the assessment kind of thing, but also she taught us how to communicate, better. So we went through that whole process for a year, and I learned a lot more about myself, all the shortfalls that I have.
Good.
Versus the team, right?
There is something I think legitimate about that delusional optimism that a founder has, because it gives you the energy to just keep persisting when other people might cower or get discouraged. Or lose hope, right? Where I think successful founders have this tendency to just persist and keep going, and they're resilient against the rejection and stuff that comes with hard days and customers that are hard to find and that kind of thing, right?
As a new founder yourself, do you think you're a little bit delusional?
I'm probably more on the other side where I have to hype myself up a little bit.
Oh, do you?
Right?
Okay.
I've worked for founders before as the operator.
Okay.
Right? And the founders I've worked for maybe more suffer on that side. I'm like the Well, no, I mean, like
You're the pragmatic founder.
kind of. So now that I'm the founder, I'm like, I have to hype myself a little bit. I have to find the hype men around me to like, you got it, you got it. So my wife like hypes me up and stuff. So
That's
I'm a little bit too pragmatic, and I listen to sobering ideas, and I deflate myself too much with the practical stuff. Sometimes just getting up and going and just not worrying about the assessment is not analyzing too much is the most important part. Just go hard. Don't analyze in advance. Just go, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, because founders need to just go, sometimes I think you get a little bit of that founder syndrome where you miss that's necessary, right? It's necessary to just forget analyzing, and then you forget to assess your weaknesses. And then so you end up carrying your weaknesses with you into your success. And then that founder syndrome includes telling yourself that this is the recipe of success. And then you've accidentally told yourself that this shitty behavior that you have is the recipe of success. It's not. It's just something that didn't get right. It's just something that didn't ruin you. It really needs to go.
Yeah.
It's just something that didn't ruin you. So that's good that you do it. That you've done kind of like a coaching. I probably need some of that myself, like an executive.
She's awesome. Her name's Allie. I'll put you in touch with her.
That's good. I've got a good friend actually who's an executive coach. I've talked to about that.
Okay.
Exactly. But anyway, I'd be interested in meeting her.
She's amazing. That self-assessment was critical.
Nice.
It reminds me of this book. I haven't read it yet, but everybody says I should read it. What got you here won't get you there.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of it.
Right? But I think that's the concept, right? All your crappy habits are great to get you going, to beat the market, to beat the odds just by a tad bit, but you're not going to beat the odds by a lot.
That's right.
Somehow you got to get rid of that old behavior.
Yeah, I have observed that. Going from 0 to 10 is not the same as 10 to 100, is not the same as 100 to 1,000. I've been part of those transitions firsthand, and it does require very different executive leadership. It can be a different you, though.
I've mentioned this to my team. It can be a different me, but I might be too slow to get there, and the company can scale much faster.
Sure. Maybe it's a partner or a colleague.
I don't mind having another CEO. I always look at like, what's my calling? What am I supposed to be doing? I always think that I'm just an accidental CEO. I'm really a good CTO. I love tech. That's my first love. That's why I built the cyber front to begin with. If there is somebody else that comes along, if I'm blessed with that opportunity to have another partner, man, that would be amazing.
Well, let's do an executive search for that CEO, man.
Hey, man, you never know, right?
They're not easy to find.
They're not easy to find. Actually, I was talking to another co-founder, another cyber security executive that bought and sold, and he raised like $10 million, to do it. And I said to him, hey, you why don't you become the CTO, financials aside, equity aside. He said, I just could not find a CEO that was culturally fit. Then I found one, but he didn't have the market knowledge. So you get one or the other. It's just a tough find. You know what I mean? That I would say that's like the hardest person to find.
You mentioned earlier in the conversation that you've learned as a leader to manage your expectations when it comes to talent, right? You've learned to manage your expectations with regard to talent. That's wise advice even for yourself. You may not be the CEO you think you need, but you might be the best one you get, man.
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
You're the one who stumbled into the situation that's leading these 20 people. I worked for a CEO once, a founder, and I remember him asking me, hey, maybe then you should be the CEO. And I was like, flattered, thank you. I feel like I've got some of the skills, but man, this is your job. You are the guy. And I think what he really needed was like, help me understand why it's me. And it was him. He was the man. And I'm glad he heard it. And he did need to hear it. And I'm glad I was able to articulate it clearly. And he heard it clearly. And he was the man. And that role fit well for him. And I think it's natural to wonder, like, would somebody else be doing this better?
Yeah, I always ask that. So I had a similar situation. Had a friend. I asked him, hey, we're friends. Do you want to be the CEO? Like, it's just us talking. I said, just think about it. I'd be open to that sort of thing. And then my investors are like, no, we're putting money in because of you, right?
Yeah.
And that's important, right? It's important to have the market and the business understanding. But then if you're a founder that has led with a raise and all that, the investors have a certain expectation of a type of CEO that they want. So that's where I stopped. I was like, man, maybe I won't be able to get my second round. And
well, I would imagine, I'm not an angel investor, but I would imagine that there's a lot of weight on just character and trust as well. Not just market knowledge and your technical chops, but just your character, your persona. They're trusting you as a person.
They're looking for people who are stewarding.
True. That's right.
At that stage, they're not looking for people who are going to make them $100 billion, right? They're looking for people who are stewarding. So yeah, that's the feedback I got is, hey, you need to be the CEO because you're stewarding what we put in here.
Yeah, we're not investing in your spreadsheet.
That's right. So I think at early stages, that's really important.
What's the state of the business now?
It's healthy. It's good. I think just trying to figure out for a technical co-founder or technical founder, sales and marketing is the hardest part.
Yeah, it is.
That's where we are right now. I'm just actually hired our marketing manager. She's doing fantastic. She worked for me a couple of years ago as like a sales professional.
Okay.
She did really well. She wanted to go a different direction and now she's back. So
yeah,
she's doing pretty awesome. So I would say right now the state of the business is healthy, but we need to figure out how to scale.
Okay.
And that's going to come through solving the human challenge and then the marketing and the sales side of the house.
Who's your typical customer? Do you have an ideal target customer or do you have a typical customer that you've done business with historically?
Like Cincinnati Children's, right?
Seems like you kind of have a healthcare.
A healthcare is a focus. We look for I put customers in two categories and they share one thing in common. They have highly regulated data.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the common theme, right?
Okay.
I've got lots of data and it's regulated. I need to do something with it. So that's just from, market perspective, horizontal. Vertically, we were focusing on healthcare and then another vertical called the defense industrial base, which is anybody and everybody who does the work with the U.S. government. That's where 90% of our customers are.
Okay.
And then we have about 10% like in financial services.
Okay.
Because they have regulated data. But vertically, we've been focusing on healthcare, defense industrial base, small or large.
Okay.
But they're all regulated.
Both highly regulated, data-intensive industries, and both pretty robust in this region, right? Those are big economies right here in the Tri-State.
Yeah, the funny thing is, when I first started, none of my business actually came from local. It was actually all out of state, actually, 100% of it. We're Midwest slow movers, right? Innovative tech. You get a slow no.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll go to California, right? That's where we got a bunch of customers up front, and New York.
Yeah, there is a ton of healthcare and a ton of defense contractors right here, though. So
there are. It's just the culture. We just move at a different pace.
Well, hopefully that changes for you here locally. I'll see.
I think it is. I think it slowly is. When you build a brand, you invest in the community, it slowly is. But I actually haven't gone around locally. A lot of business that has come our way has just been through referral, word of mouth locally. But when it comes to pursuit and marketing and all of those activities, it's all been out of state.
So can we talk a little bit about the Ignyte platform?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what it does.
So let's just take an example like River Ring.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's a great customer. They have to get through this entire audit of security compliance.
Okay.
There are thousands of checklists and documents and policies and procedures that have to be compiled every quarter. The platform automates all of that. On the other side is a policy will say, yeah, my password policy is that I have 10-character password or something ridiculous, right? Somebody needs to actually scan the computer and check all that. Our platform will actually consume all that information and link it to the actual words to see if you meet the intent of the actual policy and the regulation. We call it RegTech. It's regulatory technology, and it looks at intent of what you're doing. So it doesn't just look at word matches, it just looks at the main intent. Are you actually intentionally following what you say you do? That's what the platform does.
What a huge time saver.
A lot of customers, they typically end up saving 2 to 3 months of full-time work that they would assign an analyst.
So does the platform improve regulatory compliance over a process that's executed manually by analysts?
Usually it improves it by making sure there's no inaccuracies and knowledge management. So cyber talent is hard to keep. and retain. Everything is usually stuck in a spreadsheet or an email. So as soon as that person leaves, there's no retention of that knowledge. So there's that aspect, but then there's the aspect of how do I, break it down in a way that it's repeatable over and over. That was the initial aim. That was the initial hypothesis, is how do I make it repeatable, scalable. The other benefits that some of our customers have seen, Alida Health, very large customer. They have had where people have grown into a different position, and the benefit there has been that, there's retention of knowledge, right? The person can leave, but you still have a system of record. Everything is in place. So that's something I realized like years later when people re-up. Like, why did you re-up? Oh, yeah, because the people who are managing it are gone, and this thing is the only thing we got that tells us what they did.
What do you see changing about your product over the next year or two?
So I've actually mentioned this to my team. I think our entire industry is up for a complete disruption with the large language model OpenAI release. I think our entire industry can be automated and become much more efficient. So we are kind of leaning way forward and reinvesting into rebuilding the whole platform that's completely driven by artificial intelligence. If we don't do it, it's going to become useless. So we've taken deliberate actions and invested money towards just those kinds of things. So all these check boxes, right? Somebody's got to check them. Somebody's got to check the checker. What can we just make that checker a quick approver? I think that's when it comes to legal matters and general compliance, that whole industry is going to get disrupted over the next decade, and it's going to happen really fast over the course of that decade.
Your intent is to do it over the next year or two so that you're behind the eight ball in 8 years.
We've actually established a research agreement with the Air Force to try to get ahead of that.
Interesting.
They've passed on some machine learning algorithms that they worked within their cybersecurity areas that was previously classified. To get in front of that, you have to have intelligent people, you have to have researchers, you have to have PhDs. For small business here in Dayton, Ohio, very difficult to conquer, right? You need a lot of capital. So what we've done is intentionally partnered with Air Force, Navy, where they do have big research outfits, right, in order to get ahead of that. That's what's coming up next for the entire platform. I love it. I mean, it's just, we spend so much of that in our government. So a lot of that now is becoming available.
What are you most concerned about in terms of getting that accomplished? What's the most intimidating part of it?
I think it's going to be the ability to find the right kind of people. Cyber talent is hard to find, but it's somewhat available. Artificial intelligence talent, I think people are just talking about it. They're calling it the new field, prompt engineering. You got to go deeper than just a prompt. I think that's going to be tough for a lot of people. There's going to be a surge of like, I got to find the right person. That's what I think is going to be the next, as people get displaced.
Yeah, it's going to be a dogfight for the next couple of years for sure.
Yeah. What about you? What do you think for your business? What's next?
I don't see a ton of threat in the executive search business, precisely because it's all pretty fully deployed and it annoys the hell out of everybody. So I don't see it being really effective in terms of soliciting and actually producing engaged candidates. What's still really effective, and what's really probably more effective than ever, again, is just handshakes, right? Like actually knowing people. Happy hours and coffee shops and such are more productive than ever when it comes to recruiting. People who will take your calls and text messages. I think it's getting real manual again, interestingly. The copy paste, whatever, is just so annoying.
Do you think that's because of post-COVID, or is it because we have so much technology we don't appreciate people anymore?
The barrier to entry into somebody's inbox is so low that there's no value.
Oh, right.
Yeah. To get 100,000 messages into my inbox costs nothing. So I value none of them. When I started Reckless Tech as this peer-to-peer referral thing, my whole objective was to get ahead of that and to engage the broader community in a referral behavior, so that people who knew each other would engage the recruiting business. And I still think that model could take off in some mechanism that works. I couldn't quite figure out the magic sauce. Something like that might work. It's going to be a leverage of credible perspective on people that matters, right? My resume matches your job description, and the AI and machine learning to match words to words. That stuff is garbage. That stuff is absolute garbage. It's actual firsthand perspective and trust and credibility that's going to win the day. And that might be enabled through some kind of technology, but it's going to be firsthand observations and checkable, referenceable perspective that matters more than anything else. There are some cool things going on, automating reference checks and putting people's performance assessments on the blockchain and stuff like this. So you have some like
Really?
long memory of people's, engagement and performance and stuff. So there's some interesting things going on, but really when it comes to like hunting hard to find talent, people who know them are going to be the ones who can get in front of them, right? It's the referral behavior that's going to make all that stuff work. So I really think that's the future. It's one handshake to another. It's going to get real manual again.
Lack of transparency, deepfakes, and ChatGPT putting out nonsense content all the time, you're going to be like, I want something real.
You can multiply your talent brand content by 1 trillion times. It doesn't matter. I want to talk to Rick who works in that web development team. That's it. Like if I don't know a guy who works there and I don't have a coffee with him and like hear his firsthand perspective on it, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear your employment video. I don't want to all of that stuff has become worth considerably less now because it's so much easier to produce and it's so much more pervasive. Firsthand, belly-to-belly, relationship-based content is going to mean more than it ever did.
It's crazy, right? Because it's creating the opposite effect of what we intended.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, we're going to have all this efficiency and don't need people, but then people are going to gravitate towards what they actually want, which is other people.
Now we've got a peak efficiency. Now let's throw it all away.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though. For an old guy like me, I got gray hair and a big network. It's kind of good, I guess. It works for a while for me until something else, automates and change and throws a curveball at us. Who knows?
I had a buddy. He called everybody a grapener.
What do you do for a living? I know a bunch of guys.
I'm a grapener.
You said you have about 20 people on your team. Mm-hmm. How'd you put that team together? I guess over the last 3 years or so?
A lot of it
you've worked with? Or
a lot of it is just through referrals.
Okay.
And people that I personally know.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
That's the best way that I found to build a team at an early stage.
100% the best way.
Right. And then, but we did have some people that applied. Mm-hmm. So we had a few of those, but they only lasted you could say about a year or two.
It's that firsthand knowledge, so oh man, that's so valuable.
We had some great interns as well. So we did an internship program. Okay. We've had about 5-6 interns. So a couple of them from Cedarville, Sinclair.
Okay.
And we deliberately and intentionally tell them, look, cyber, you make a ton of money. Mm-hmm. We may not be able to afford you. Mm-hmm. So we're going to teach you everything we know, and we're going to try to retain you, but most likely you're going to get picked up by the IBMs of the world.
Right, okay.
And that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
So we're friends with them, and they're referring people too now.
Well, I mean, referrals are the winning route, right? I mean, it's getting, but you asked me, it's that firsthand knowledge. I mean, nothing's better. It also gives you have a vested interest when somebody refers or whatever, they want somebody to be successful. So it makes them more likely to be, because everybody's kind of biased toward their success, and there's something to be said for that. There's a scaling problem with that, though.
There's a scaling. That's why, man.
Whole network fatigue.
Yeah.
A friend of mine kind of described it. It only goes so far. Well, one last question, Max, before I let you go. As you're kind of thinking about scaling your team, when you think about what matters most to you about retaining the culture of your team, what to you is the most important thing? Let's say 2 years from now, you're 5 times as big. You're not as close to everybody on the team. You haven't made the hiring decisions for everybody. Maybe you haven't even interviewed everybody, right? You've got managers who have made the hiring decisions. When you get to that stage where, the direct connection to everybody on the team is more secondhand, it's a little bit bigger. There's more extension of relationships. What's the most important thing, most important characteristic that you want to see team retain in terms of its cultural characteristics?
I've actually thought about this because as we were scaling, we started to get team members who I've never talked to and customers who I've never talked to, which happened 2 years ago. That felt weird. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Oh man, I don't even know how that deal happened. Or I don't even know that person does, right? To me, the most important value that we want to have pervasively throughout our organization, at least until we get to a certain point, is just extreme amount of transparency and showing of vulnerability and compassion, kind of balancing those two. Mm. Because people are going to get upset because they're not able to do whatever the expectation is, because of all the pivots along the way. We have to balance the compassion as people are being transparent. I think that's going to be important. I found that to be very important as I went through the executive transition for myself, because I'm impatient. I'm like, I want it done yesterday. That's self-reflecting a little bit. Tend to hire people that are kind of like us to some degree, even though, you know, you want people that are different than you. So, but that one value that I want to be pervasive throughout is like transparency, and then show compassion. If people are really transparent, they genuinely don't know in some aspect of their work of what they're doing.
That creating that psychological safety is really tricky for an ambitious, you know, aggressive grower, you know, to do. So somebody who's building a business to then be very intentional about making sure people in the business feel safe to be insufficient at times.
Yes, that's critical.
That's a challenging objective.
It's really hard. I'm like failing at it sometimes, you know, I'm getting upset, right? So like, come on, it's simple. You just got to click this, you know, whatever, right?
Good luck.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I need a lot of it. So,
all right, man. Thanks for being on the show. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for having me, man. You got
all right.
Awesome setup.
Thanks.
So.
Yeah, and good luck on your podcast too.